Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Healthy Families Oregon State Advisory Committee meeting. Happy summer. I can't believe we're already at the end of July. That is wild. I hope folks have had a little bit of time to take off for little vacations or even staycations. Getting some time off is so important. So I hope that all have been able to do that. My name is Elena Rivera. I am the committee chair, and we're really excited to just have some time to connect with you all and share some updates, some program updates, continue our conversation about equity and parent voice, and also hear some evaluation data and look ahead to strategic planning as well. So we definitely have a lot on our agenda. I am going to officially call the meeting to order and ask Christina to help us do a roll call of committee members.
Can do. Thank you very much. All right. Benjamin Hazelton.
Present.
Thank you. Beth Dasher.
Present.
Beth Green. I believe that she will be joining us later. I'll record her presence when she joins. Brenda Comini.
Present.
Thank you. Elena.
Present.
Thank you. Emily Berry.
Present.
Thank you. Gisela Morales.
Present.
Gracias. Hannah Hill.
Here.
Thank you. Jean Vinson. All right. Martha Brooks.
Present.
Thank you. Melody Carrington.
Present.
Thank you. And Rosario Leischner. All right. Elena, shall we check in on attendance when Beth Green joins us before I record everybody else?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Will do. Thank you so much. The roll call is complete, and we do have a quorum for this meeting.
Excellent. Thank you, Christina. And just a quick welcome to the members of the public who have joined this meeting. We're really glad that these are public meetings, and if there are thoughts or input that you want to share, feel free to share thoughts in the chat or send direct messages to myself or any of our early learning division staff who are on this call as well. So we haven't received any written testimony that has come in, but we do want to take a moment and see if any members of the public are here to provide public testimony. Any public testimony? Okay, hearing none, we'll go ahead and move forward, and I'm excited to turn it over to Gwen from the Early Learning Division to share a few really exciting program updates. So Gwen, please go ahead.
All right, thank you, Elena, and also members of the advisory committee. So I was briefly here, I think a month or two ago, and so I'm really glad that I can stay for the whole meeting today, but this is my first time providing an update in Elizabeth's place. So Elena, please, if I'm doing anything out of order, please manage me well on that one. So I'll start with the update on the new state Healthy Families Oregon Program Manager position. And we had anticipated that the new person would be starting with us last Wednesday, but we are challenged with having timely background checks done. And this, I think, is impacting a lot of programs across the state, but it's also impacting our hiring processes as well. So we're just waiting for some final things to move on through, and hopefully we'll be able to report that that person has started at our next meeting, and it'll probably happen before that. So we're still anxiously waiting for that to be filled. And then I would say that Elizabeth Underwood, who has been in the role. She is moving. She's been very patient and supporting HFO through this transition, but as there has been this delay, we are needing to move her into her other position at the ELD. And so you might be seeing a little bit more of me in the meantime until we get the new manager on board. So any questions from the committee on that?
And I was just curious if the Early Learning Division will kind of release a formal announcement once the new program manager is on board, and if we could just make sure that that gets out to all of the advisory committee members as well.
That's great. Yeah, we'll make sure, Christina and I can make sure that we provide sort of her bio and any other information. And like I said, and hopefully she'll be able to come and join the next meeting to introduce herself. So great. All right, and then for the HFO Program Update Report, I know that Elizabeth submitted that as part of the documents for the meeting. I wasn't sure if you prefer that for kind of the record that I run through that and pull that up on screen. Is that the preferred strategy here?
Yeah, you don't have to pull it up on screen, but just kind of touching on the highlights would be awesome to refresh committee members' memories.
Yeah. So the first update that was provided was around the HFO database system, and that work is continuing. There are meetings monthly that are occurring, and then there's also some weekly internal meetings at the ELD, kind of moving that project forward. The report also indicated, though, that the system that HFA uses, the HVOL, isn't HIPAA compliant. And so in feedback that we received from HFO grantees, that could be an issue because some of our grantees have multiple programs that they're operating and need to be HIPAA compliant. So we're working kind of through that right now. But if we're not able to use the HVOL system, then we would need to go out for requests for proposals for a new database system. So that's where we're at on that. And then in regard to the new HFA best practice standards and our next steps, Elizabeth had submitted a timeline for the advisory committee to review. And also that we'll be seeking some volunteers from this group to join a work group to move forward any of the new best practices. And making sure that all of our policies and procedures are updating the new best practices, and also that any forms are also updated as well. So it's my understanding that the work group is not yet established, so some of the timelines on here might need to be adjusted. We haven't yet received the new best practices from HFA, so we're still waiting on that. It's anticipated that we'll receive that probably this week. We need to establish the work group, and then, like I said, we'll be seeking 3 volunteers from the advisory committee. And what we'll do is Christina and I can send out an email highlighting and sort of just giving more information around sort of the time commitment, the schedule, what would be the expectations of the volunteers, length of service, et cetera. And then have volunteers just submit through kind of probably a Survey Monkey their interest. And then if we get more than 3, we'll probably need to come back to the group and make some decisions. But it'd be great if we can get 3 volunteers. And Emily will be facilitating that work group. And so I think that's on that.
It looks like Beth has a question.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Sorry, I was looking at my time.
Will this ad hoc work group include people outside of the advisory?
Yes. And I was thinking, I was getting coalition and advisory, Beth, I had to get my mind straight on that. Yes, my understanding is it would be, I'm assuming that it'll be members like program managers and that other members of the ELD, and then volunteers from the advisory committee as well. But
Thank
Emily,
you.
if you had any other information on that you'd like to share as the facilitator, please jump in.
I think that is similar to my understanding as well thus far.
Thanks. All right.
I can just jump in and say I participated in an ad hoc policy and procedure work group. I want to say the last time that the best practice standards were updated, maybe 4 years ago, 3 or 4 years ago. And as a back then Best Beginnings committee member, it was so valuable for me to really get a little bit of a deep dive into some of the ins and outs of program requirements, and learned a lot about what Healthy Families America requires, and then how Oregon kind of adopts and implements those requirements, and getting to connect with program managers and other staff from local programs was just such a rich opportunity to learn more about kind of how those, national and Oregon standards really impact home visitors and families on the ground. So I'll just put in a quick plug that I think it's a fabulous opportunity for committee members to get to know the work of Healthy Families Home Visitors.
That was a great plug, Elena. Thank you. All right, and then let's see. And then I've already given the update. And then it's just sort of an FYI on the new Healthy Families assessment tool, which is the FROG scale. And I had to look that up. That stands for Family Resilience and Opportunities for Growth. So I think this was, when I was looking at it, sort of a nice shift. It captures risk factors, but also, like I said, focuses on identifying protective factors and resilience. So that'll be, I think, a nice shift. All staff will be trained on the new tool starting in September. And then we will be, it'll require some minor adjustments to forms, but it's overall seen as an improvement. And then I worked with Elizabeth, and I think we're pretty much set on moving forward with an RFP for a technical assistance and quality assurance contractor. And we kind of put in parentheses individual or individuals. We really do want to, if it's a combination of 1 or 2 entities that actually fulfill the need, we don't want to limit ourselves necessarily on just one. So we'll be issuing that RFP as soon as we can get that kind of through procurement, and making sure that everything's in place for March 2022 when our current contract expires. So,
Elena, this is Martha. I have several questions.
Yeah, go ahead, Martha.
Okay, so Gwen, first of all, on the RFP and the technical person and the compliance, we don't have anybody right now. Is that correct?
Let me double check on that, Martha, because we do have a current contract in place. And so, but I know that we've had some procurement issues. And so let me get back to you and double check to make sure, because as I'm learning, we have multiple contracts with HFO. And so I don't want to give misinformation, and I just want to double check for you on that.
Okay, all right. What I think would be helpful, Gwen, for this committee is if you could provide us with who all is involved with HFO on the state level and what those contracts are. Like, do we have an assistant for whoever this new person is coming in? I know that Christina's been doing a lot of that. Is she the program person for us to go to if we have questions other than, the technical stuff? And then the RFP, what does this person do and who else do we have? And then I understand we did have somebody that was doing some training, but I don't know if that contract still exists.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's one. And then on the ad hoc policy and procedure work group, I didn't hear how you want people to apply from the committee. If there's, are we supposed to get to Emily, and or Elena, or who are we supposed, or you from the committee? And if so, can we have that email address and how to let that process be known?
Yeah, let me start. I'll start with that one. And I'm sorry if I wasn't clear on that, Martha, is that the ELD will send out an email requesting volunteers that provides more specifics about kind of the time frame and the time commitment. And I think in talking with Christina, I think we'll probably just do that with like a Survey Monkey to gain, to gather information as sort of a semi-formal kind of volunteer application. And then if we have more than 3, then we'll need to make a decision with this committee on how we make it, do we keep everybody or do we really limit it to 3 and move forward from there? So it will be an email coming from the ELD on that one. And then Martha, in regard to the contracts, I think I just want to make sure that presenting you with what you need. So what I was hearing is that it would be really helpful to maybe have like a chart that has the current contracts and sort of like what those contracts, not necessarily a full detailed scope of work, but sort of like what is that contractor's role, and then maybe an expiration date or sort of a duration for that project period. And then and then also indicating any open contracts that are either currently that we're actually, receiving applications for right now or are in the process with procurement. Would that help, so that there's kind of an update on that, and that it would include all of them, and that we could maybe review that frequently so that it's sort of an update? Would that help?
Yeah, I think, Gwen, at least from my perspective, and others can speak for themselves, but I don't know who the staff is anymore. And what they do. And so it'd be really helpful to have that, so that if we have questions as far as the advisory committee members, we have the correct person to go to, and that whoever the new program manager is, we're not bugging her for, minor stuff that we should be going to somebody else with. And then, like I said, I don't know who's on board as far as contracts for training, and that stuff. So yeah, that would be good.
I think that's a great idea, Martha. And I'm wondering if that's something we could just include in the next, prior to our next meeting, kind of the HFO program updates that regularly get compiled and sent out to committee members in advance, if that could be something that get included in there. I agree, that would be really valuable.
If we could have it though before the next meeting, I mean, it'd be nice to have that, as well as a list of committee members with their emails and where they're at, what organization, etc.
Okay, got it.
And then one more question, Gwen.
Yeah, and I just want to, I'll just follow up. So currently, the staff that are assigned to HFO was Elizabeth as our program manager, and also Christina Cooley. And now as we're, filling Elizabeth's position, but it will continue to be Christina. And I know that Christina is super capable. I know she's been really helpful during this transition, but once we get the new manager in place, I think what'll be good, Martha, is like some of the work that maybe Christina has been helping us through this transition. We want to make sure that we're really clearly delineating kind of like what is Christina's role and what should go to her, and then what needs to go to the program manager, and maybe what needs to come to me in my role. So we can work on that. Right now, like I said, I think Christina, and she kind of DM'd me, and she's like, right now it's okay to reach out, and she can sort of triage and then move things to me, or we can, Elizabeth is still with the ELD. She's just in a different role. So we can definitely get some context and information from her as well in this transition. So your next question. Yeah.
So, and Elena's probably waiting for this question. On the database, we haven't had one since 2015, and this is becoming a critical issue. You all need that as we advance into reaccreditation. Mm-hmm. And I did ask a question of Alyssa, and I know she's been like, really, really busy, but did any of the money roll over from the last biennium to continue to purchase that system, or are we going to have to take money out of this budget for the system? And I'm understanding that the HIPAA issue is the major concern. Is there a workaround on that or not? And when I was on the ELD, I asked every meeting, you know, when are we getting that system? I'm really concerned.
Mhm.
It could affect accreditation.
Yeah, I share your concern. I just want to, and in regard to the money, we're not able to roll money over across bienniums. So any money that would be used to procure a database system in this biennium is the new money. So that would be the general fund and SSA funds that are for HFO. I'm curious when you say, is there a workaround? If you have any suggestions on that, I guess, because I think that the group that's working on it is considering workarounds. But if there's any, I think that any creative or other solutions, that can be generated would be welcomed. But Martha, I wasn't sure if you had, if you had a suggestion on a workaround at this time for the HIPAA compliance.
Yeah, as I understand, it's the system out in New York. They've not had to deal with HIPAA, or they are ignoring it. I'm not sure which. In either case, we can't ignore it.
Right.
Our folks need to do that. So is there an outside of their database system, a way to become HIPAA compliant?
Okay.
I don't know if that's a yes or a no or a maybe. And then if it's not, and they won't change their system, Gwen, do you have any kind of an idea what system is out there that can be off the shelf? I mean, it appears to me that if we can't get that system, we're another 2 years down the road without a database.
I don't yeah. Like I said, I also, HFO is one of the programs that I work in supporting, and database systems for all of them is definitely a challenge that we faced at the Early Learning Division. So I think what I can do, Martha, is I don't know one off the shelf. You know what I mean? Like that's not necessarily, but I think what I'm hearing and what we can do is probably we'll need maybe more detailed updates for this group around the progress from the work group and also the project managers who are working on this. And we can make sure that we do that just to kind of making sure that, for transparency, but also for just, like I said, this could take a few of us putting, more than, like it's going to need a solution, right? And so sometimes we're not sure where those great ideas are going to come from. So the more people who are aware and thinking on this, I welcome. So.
I mean, they were promised in 2015 that it would be a couple of months, and the old system was turned off. And then after each legislative session, it seems like we have to hit the restart button. And it's not fair to the programs. I know you know that. But they've developed their own systems. Beth's not on yet, but Beth Green and her staff have to take virtually spreadsheets and figure it out. And that doesn't give us really the good data that we need.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, and the program collects so much great data for us not to be able to maneuver it and use it in the best interest of children and families is I agree. It's a lost resource there without a better database system. Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Gwen. I appreciate you checking into all that.
Oh, no problem. I really appreciate the feedback. It helps me to know where we need to put our energies in our reports to this group. And I did want to it wasn't on the update, but it was sort of my own update that I had the opportunity to meet with the coalition last month, and that was great to meet the group. I see some of the names here. And during that meeting, we really focused on, we just finished up legislative session. We didn't have everything shaken out yet, but as you know, we had requested in our policy option package and the governor's recommended budget, the $4 million for an additional 423 families being served, but legislatively approved, only received the 100 new families served for $830,000. So it's not a large increase in the second year, but we're really committed to working with the coalition and thinking about how those funds can be best used in support of the programming. So more to come there.
Gwen, that's a nice carryover into our legislative updates, but I did know that Benjamin had his hand up for a few minutes there. Benjamin, do you have a question?
Yeah, it was really more of, sorry, I was about to type it in because it was really, I had the same thought about the database. Could it be made HIPAA compliant with, a minimal level of effort so that it would be useful? I can explore. I know there are some other systems that other states are using for home visiting. So I can sort of poke around a little bit with some of my McD peers to see, but I'll admit, I was really hoping not just for HFA as a whole, but recently in my office, they made a decision not to require the nurse family partnership programs to enter into THEOs so that we weren't having double entry. And I was hoping to make that same case for the Healthy Families programs that we fund as well, so that they're just entering into one database and then we're getting the data that we need out from there. So we don't have, home visitors shouldn't be spending their time entering into multiple databases, in my opinion. So.
Thank you, Benjamin. I'll probably follow up. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great offer. And to your second point, Benjamin, I know that we'll talk about the strategic plan implementation a bit later, but I do know that that is one of the priorities lifted up, is ensuring that any onboarding of a new data system also comes with some efforts to ensure that home visitors aren't having to enter their data into multiple systems. So I think that that is a state priority as well. Gwen, was there anything else you wanted to share on program updates?
I think that's all, unless there's any further questions, but thank you.
Yeah, were there any other questions from committee members? All right, I needed to quickly scroll down my videos. I didn't see any. And so I would love to now take us into a few legislative updates. We finished the legislative session, hooray. And Beth Dasher and Martha are both going to share some updates from what was accomplished. Gwen gave the high level summary of outcomes around the Healthy Families Oregon funding request, but I'm curious to hear the perspectives of Martha and Beth. So who's going to kick us off?
Thanks, Elena. Beth and I are kind of going to take pieces of this. So first of all, as you all know, long session ended the end of June. I'm going to tell you personally, I thought it was a hard session, not because of the issues or what was going on, but because it was all virtual. So it made it extremely difficult for any lobbyist on any issue from A to Z to get to a legislator. So it wasn't just early childhood. It wasn't just agencies, it was everybody. And I did meet with Senator Steiner Hayward last week, and she said it was an exhausting session for legislators too. So let's hope we don't have to do one of these again. I'm going to let Beth start us off.
Thanks, Martha. Let's see. So the flip side of it being virtual is that the opportunities for staff and families to bring their voices to the table was definitely improved. Our coalition got quite a few people from around the state to present and also to submit written testimony. So I know that we had some parents, some home visitors, some program managers, that there was somebody each of the 5 sessions, and that some of them we had 2 or 3. So, and then there was a lot of written testimony submitted. So there was a lot of support towards the efforts of Healthy Families, the legislative session. Like Gwen mentioned, it still didn't quite have the outcomes we were looking for, but we'll just keep at it, and hopefully we'll become more and more recognized.
Thank you, Beth. So for the last 20 years, I'm just going to say that the HFO folks really stepped up to advocate for themselves in a way that I've never seen before. So they had people at everyone at what we call the road show, the Ways and Means, the 5 hearings, and somebody at least spoke, if not 2 or 3, and then there was a lot more testimony. I'm going to start out with the bills, and then I'm going to end with what I thought was a really nice piece for home visiting on a whole in the session. So starting with SB 5513, and let me back up half second. Alyssa sent out an update, the Early Learning Division legislative session recap, and that can be provided for anybody who wants it, and I can send it to Christina so that she can send it out. But SB 5513 was the budget bill, and Oregon's early learning programs were funded at current service levels for the 21-23 biennium. And some programs such as Preschool Promise, Oregon Pre-Kindergarten, Early Head Start, HFO, Early Childhood Equity Fund, and Kindergarten Transition received additional investments totaling just over $108.5 million in new money. Of that 108.5, there's $69 million that came through the GRB and SSA specifically, mostly in increased service slots. The other funds were specific set-asides, for example, the suspension expulsion bill that I'll talk about here in a minute. Of that 69 million, the legislatures immediately released 39 million, and in my notes said that the HFO funds would be released right away too. But of course, there has to be the system that goes through that process. So it won't come to you today. Those decisions are not made yet as to how those funds will go out. But 30 million is being held in reserve. Held back by the legislature. The ELD has to report in February. And the basic issue that we kept hearing in the legislative session was that the subjoint education Ways and Means are skeptical about capacity. And so they aren't giving all the funds right now. So the ELD is going to have to present that program as to how they're going to roll out the money and what those needs are. As I'm understanding, they've got a pretty good proposal. And that proposal also could include that, gee, we're short money and still need more. So Gwen, we need more. You guys figure it out for us. HFO received, as Gwen said, 829,000 in new funding, which is only about 100 slots, or about, as I call them, one pod basically of home visitors. So that'd be about 5 or 6 home visitors and one supervisor. You can't, as you all know, individually put a slot here and a slot there because you guys are all full. The governor was asking for, Gwen said 4, my notes say 3.5 in increased funding. My organizations, Healthy Family Oregon Coalition, PCA Oregon, and the other Early Childhood Coalition partners were asking for 10 million. So we have some work to do on our end to make sure we get some more money. Of the total recommended budget, I think you need to know the governor was recommending 109 million in new funding. The Early Childhood Coalition came in at 127, and it really came out to 69, even though I told you there was 108, because there's a lot of money that was outside of that original GRB. Childcare investments increased by about 103.2. And most of that was to reduce copays for families 100% of poverty and below, and to expand daycare programs. Most of that funding came through federal funds. HB 3073 is the formation of the Department of Early Learning and Care, plus consolidating early child care services into one agency. That will include licensing, registration, distribution of state and federal funds, so CCDBG and ERDC. And the new DELC, DELC, will formally be created January 1st, 2023, and a final transition of childcare will be on that same date from ODHS. but there's a lot of planning and transition planning that's happening now and up to January 1 of 2023. That bill passed in the last hours of the legislature on the last day. God, nothing like making you nervous. HB 2166 and SB 236 were the suspension and expulsion bills. They both passed again at the last end of session. SB 236 directs the ELD DELC to conduct a study and outlines prevention measures. HB 2166 establishes a suspension expulsion prevention program with $5.8 million from the general fund. And that's some of that money that's outside of the original GRB ask. The program will include mental health consultation services to providers, supports for placements, reduced suspension and expulsions. This was for kids birth to age 5. This was a harder bill to get passed than I expected. K-12 has had a suspension expulsion policy in effect since 2008. That bill passed without a single no vote. This time we were touch and go. HB 2055 created the new Tribal Early Learning Hub. So this will include the 9 federally recognized tribes and moves hubs up to 17 in total. HB 2059 reforms Spark and has a tiered reimbursement, giving the and this will give the ELD some latitude in designing the system. SB 757 made a few changes in the central background registry, and this is hoping to speed up some of that process. And then SB 299 was a bill to establish after school and out of school time service districts, and that one failed. Then my last little recap, and then if there are any questions, I'll try and answer them. 30 days later, my brain is dead, so I don't remember all the details. We had an opportunity on May 10th to present a home visiting informational. Representative Karen Power, who is the chair of the House Early Childhood Committee, and I talked about it. And we did this on the heels of an informational done by Oregon Health Authority on the new universally offered home visiting. So she wanted a bigger, broader picture, and we presented basically the 3 McVie programs, which are NFP, Early Head Start, and HFO. And in about a week's time, I was able to put together 10 presenters, which included Chief John Teague out of Kaiser, who made the introductory of how important home visiting is. And then for HFO, Marguerite Kanegi out of Family Building Blocks, Lori Ayland out of High Desert, and a mom, Lynette Mishak out of Albina, testified. We also had NFP with their governmental affairs manager and a parent who was blind. And then Early Head Start, which was, we tapped OCDC. So Karen Ayers led off with them with 2 home visitors, Anne Ruiz and Ariela Mona. And they had a parent, I don't have her last name, but her first name was Christina, and we had a translator for her. So 11 participants there, and we had support staff from the ELD HFO, Oregon Health Authority, and Oregon Department of Human Services. I got 2 or 3 emails afterwards and talked to Karen Powers, Chief of Staff, and they were extremely thankful for that. It put the whole picture together for them, not just a program here and a program there. And that's Beth's and my update.
Thank you so much. I loved hearing the ending of that about just that successful informational session. And I think that you sharing the big picture, Martha, of early childhood policy and funding this legislative session is a really great reminder that any ask around Healthy Families Oregon is always going to be in the context of, you know, a broader set of asks and bills around early childhood. And so it's really important to keep in mind that full context and to be thinking across committee members and local programs, just about how Healthy Families Oregon really fits as a crucial piece of the early childhood landscape. So thank you for doing that. I want to take a moment and see if there are any questions or comments from committee members.
I noticed, Martha, that you paused, that it took longer to pass. Oh my goodness. HB 2166. And I was curious to hear a little bit more about that.
You're on mute, Martha.
Thank you. I'm looking for my notes. 2166, suspension expulsion. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm kind of surprised about that, but there were some legislators that were concerned, especially on the ability to choose or not choose who was in their program. So the House Minority Leader specifically had some pushback from constituents who had a Christian childcare and pre-K, and they wanted to be able to choose. What I think was lost in the whole discussion was it wasn't about choosing, like the child's already in your program. It's the fact that you kick them out. And why is that kicking them out? So that was one of the things that we had to overcome. Then we had two separate bills coming, one from the Senate and one from the House side. And we had to have some discussion there because each bill did slightly different things that augmented each other. So on the Senate side, we had to work really hard for a while because some of those legislators didn't understand that there was more to the equation than just the one bill. Sarah Geltzer was an extreme support on that, and I think she helped lead the way through the forest, so to speak, on both of those bills so that both sides, both the House and the Chamber understood that. But it is disconcerting that there is a lack, and I will say it, a lack of some understanding on legislators' side about how detrimental it is on suspending and expelling birth to 5 children and how it's done. And you all know it's done in a very slight manner. It can be, well, your child doesn't fit the program. Well, we just don't have room for your child and their problems or issues, or. And they're all just very small, where in fact it's, some of it comes back on us, meaning state agencies, programs, advocates, providers, to be able to find the programs to do the training so that people that are doing this work have the tools. So that was what one of the bills did as well. So I don't know if anybody else has any comments on.
I'd just jump in to say that unfortunately a lot of the rhetoric really pitted the needs of individual students with the needs of entire programs against the needs of entire programs, saying if one child is coming to a classroom with disruptive behavior, that's impacting all of the other learners in that program negatively. And so that's a dynamic that showed up where folks were saying, well, what about all of those other students in an early learning setting? Don't they have, needs and needs around being supported? So I just wanted to highlight that was another unfortunate dynamic that I think contributed to just some of the slower movement. But to Martha's point, I think there was a real important need to also talk about the supports to early learning providers that would be offered and built in to ensure that providers programs aren't on their own in navigating children's needs that are showing up, but we also know that there's a lot of bias and racism that exists in our system that needs to be addressed through workforce supports as well.
Right. And Emily, I would just say that a lot of, there are a lot more suspension expulsions than what we really realize. And those stories started to come out. One story was, we had a little kid that was going out every day and beating up kids on the playground, and they couldn't figure it out. And they did not expel him, but there was conversation about what do we do and how do we handle it. They finally found out that his only thing on the playground was a swing, and that's all he wanted to do. So they moved around and switched around and made sure that child always had a swing, and it eliminated the problem. But if you're not proactively trying to figure that out, then, the option that you had is your child doesn't fit our program. There were personal stories. Well, Miriam Calderon and I both have nephews who have been expelled. Mine's in his 30s now, but he was expelled twice with undiagnosed autism. So these are the issues that need to come to light, instead of, I need the right to expel somebody because they don't fit the religious tenor of my program. The child's already in, and that was one of the issues we had to deal with. The child's already in. It's not a matter of accepting, it's a matter of rejecting.
Well, thank you all. And I think I'm going to have to move us into our next agenda item just so that we can continue this important discussion on our work on equity and parent voice, which I think is really connected to how we advocate for early childhood investments and what specifically we're advocating for. So I see we're running about 10 minutes behind on the agenda. We'll take 15 minutes for this agenda item. After our April meeting, we had sent out a survey monkey to committee members to ask for your input on our discussions to date around centering equity and really involving and centering parent voice in our committee's work. And in particular, we asked some specific questions around what steps could our committee take that would be most meaningful. And so we had 6 committee members respond to that survey. And what we want to do now is use a Google Jamboard. I'm not sure how familiar folks are, but it's a great interactive, pretty user-friendly tool to reflect on what we heard in that survey, to add other ideas or elaborate and generate some potential next steps. And so I will go ahead and put the link to that Jamboard in the chat so that folks can pull it up on their own. I will ask, I know we have several members of the public who have joined. I will ask that you'll refrain from adding your input into the Jamboard so that it's really just reflective of our committee members' input. But we're always happy to hear your input via email or direct message or other mechanisms. So there is the link in the chat, and I'm also going to see if I can share. Let's see. Oh, you got it. Thank you, Christina. You're so on top of it. So this first slide looks at what we heard from committee members as the most impactful next steps that we could take to further equity and center parent voice together. There were 4 top themes that really rose up. The first being around developing a set of criteria for engaging parent voice that we can use moving forward when there are areas we really need parent input. The second would be reviewing what information and data we're already collecting from parents and home visitors around parent needs, priorities, and desires. Really thinking about not duplicating efforts, not overburdening families with questions that are asking about the same things over and over again, but instead taking a more thoughtful approach and inventorying what we're already collecting and learning. The third step would be to invite more sharing across our state advisory committee and local programs so that we can really learn about and mutually support parent partnership efforts. So that includes both our advisory sharing about our work with local programs and local programs sharing with us as a state advisory about what they're doing to really involve parents in their home visiting services. And then the fourth theme was around creating a vision and plan for equity and parent voice that gets embedded into the HFO strategic plan. So these are some really great, exciting next steps that I think we can absolutely take some progress steps on together as a committee. This fourth item in green, we'll talk about a little bit later when we look at the strategic plan, the draft implementation document that Elizabeth sent out. But I wanted to take the next 10 minutes or so for committee members to have a chance to weigh in greater detail on these first three themes. So if you scroll to the top and see this arrow, you can go to the next frame. Perfect. So this frame asks for input about that first item. So if we were to develop a set of criteria for engaging parent voice, what would your ideas be for those criteria? For example, would one criteria be that parents should always be paid or reimbursed to share their input? What are other kind of best practices that you see around engaging parent voice? The next slide asks about our second theme of looking at what information we're already collecting. So here I'd love to hear from committee members if you know, oh, hey, we already ask parents this piece of feedback via our parent survey, or this is something that home visitors are hearing from parents around their satisfaction with home visiting services. Just starting to generate that list of what we're already collecting. And then the last slide looks at how we could do greater sharing between our state advisory and local programs. So we're curious to hear what are local programs doing that our state advisory should know about, and then what should local programs know about our work as a state advisory? So really thinking about building some strong communication across. And so I know that in the next 10 minutes, folks might not have a chance to weigh in on all three of these items, but please just go to where your interest lies and you feel like you have the most input to share. And the way to share input is along that left toolbar. About halfway down, there's a little sticky note icon. So if you click on that, you can just type in your idea, your thought directly in. Christina, thank you so much for demonstrating. And then move it to where, yep, exactly, move it to where it goes. So I would love to invite folks to just take the next 8 to 10 minutes to input some ideas. Feel free to turn off your camera if that works better for you. And we're really excited to hear what input you have to share. So I will call us back together at 2:05.
Elena, would you prefer that we use the same color sticky note?
It is totally up to you, Brenda. Whatever color calls to you. Thank you for the question, though. I'll give folks 30 more seconds to wrap up any Post-it notes that you're in the midst of writing. All right, let's come back together as a group. I so appreciate everyone taking the time to just have some moments of quiet and do some reflecting and sharing of input. This is this is a strategy I really appreciate. I'm a more quiet internal processor, so I appreciate time individually to think and share input. So I hope that we can continue kind of offering a mix of like large discussion opportunities on this topic, but also individual input. And I am really looking forward to digging into the thoughts that folks shared here and coming back to our next several meetings with some ideas and next steps. So really appreciate you all sharing. And I am going to have to move us along on the agenda because we are really privileged to have Beth Green, a committee member who runs Healthy Families Oregon's evaluation, share some data, some recent data from the 2019 Maltreatment Report. So welcome, Beth. And actually, I'm going to pause. Christina, did you want to re-look at make sure we're all set on attendance? We've had Beth Green and then also Jean Vinson join us since we all did roll call at the beginning of our committee meeting.
Yes, thank you so much. I think you stating that they've joined us is enough for me to update the roll call. I don't think I noticed anyone else come in, but are there any other committee members that were not recorded present? Okay, I'll update the roll. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Christina. Welcome, Beth and Jean. And Beth, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Okay, thanks, Elena. And hi, everybody. Sorry I had to join a little late, but better late than never, hopefully. Christina, do I have screen sharing? Yes, I do.
I believe so.
Okay, great. So I usually am a participant in these meetings, but I was asked today to share with you our most recent findings around maltreatment outcomes for the Healthy Families Oregon project. So that's what I'm going to do. And let's see. Can everybody see those slides? Great. Okay. So let me just make sure this is working. I feel like sometimes it doesn't want to advance. All right, let's go.
And Beth, just to clarify, I know we're getting started a little bit late, so you have until 2:25.
Oh, plenty of time.
Great.
Assuming that I can get these slides to cooperate and actually advance forward, which there we go. I don't know why it always seems like there's a lag. Okay. So yeah, happy to share the slides with you today, and feel free to jump in or put in the chat if you have any questions. I think everyone here is familiar with the Healthy Families Oregon program, and that a major goal for that program is to ensure children are free from maltreatment, including both physical and emotional neglect and abuse. The data here are the most recent we have available, although hoping we'll have some new data. It took quite a while to get the 2018 calendar year data back from our partners over at DHS. But so this is data that shows all children who were served in the 2018 calendar year, because Healthy Families runs now on the calendar year, who were ages 0 to 3 and who either were screened or enrolled in 2018. So pre-COVID world, you can imagine that. And every year we do a data linking study, for those of you who haven't been here before, where we submit a list of participating children to our partners at DHS, and they link that data with their maltreatment records and give us back information about which children had substantiated maltreatment reports during that calendar year. Okay. Why is it not going? I'm clicking the screen. There we go. Okay. Yeah, it could just be slow internet. I gotta figure out where to put this little bar to get it to go away. All right, so our first finding, for some of you may remember, so this is just to orient you to this slide. The blue line on the top is the maltreatment rate per 1,000 for children not in healthy families. And for this slide, not in healthy families basically means anyone who is not screened, a family's not screened or enrolled in home visiting services. So you can see that historically, we've been collecting this data for a long time. And then the black line is the maltreatment rate per 1,000 of our healthy families, children who've been screened or served by healthy families. And historically, we had always had much lower rates of maltreatment in the healthy families group. And then in 2015, 2017, that biennium, we did only one report over both years and saw this very weird start of findings where all of a sudden we were seeing higher rates among the healthy families groups. And we had a lot of discussion, both with the programs and with this advisory group, about why that might be. Did a lot of speculation. We were never able to find an answer, but probably multiple answers in terms of related both to changes in the data and how the data were collected, to increases in the risk factors among the healthy families population. But anyways, the bottom line is that this year, again, we see it going back at least to where it's slightly lower than the rate we see for non-healthy families treatment or non-healthy families children, which is what we hope would be the case. It's still not as low as it had been historically, although, as I think probably most of you are aware, the rates of reported maltreatment have been going up steadily. We don't know what's going to happen during COVID, of course. But so we see that happening in the blue group, in the statewide group. And again, we see that happening in our group if you look overall. And who knows, I still am not sure about the 35 cases per 1,000 and what was going on with that. But at least this year, we're seeing something that is at least closer to what we had been seeing in previous years in terms of those maltreatment rates. Trying to advance, just waiting. There we go. So I think I just said what's on this slide, which is the differences in the patterns that we're seeing over time. So I'm going to move us to the next slide. So this slide, remember that first slide included both families receiving home visits who were enrolled in Healthy Families Intensive Services, as well as those families who were screened. What this is focused on are just the children who were those higher risk home visited families. And we know by definition, of course, because they're screened at higher risk and then they are actually enrolled in services, that they tend to be higher risk than children who are screened only. So the comparison here is of those two groups. So you can see, as we have seen before in the past, the rate of reports for children in the program, the dark blue bar on the top, is higher than that of families who are screened only. And there's a number of reasons for that, as in addition to the fact that they're sort of by definition higher risk. There are also the families who are having someone coming into their home, being there, being aware of the situations, and also being mandatory reporters, and therefore having the obligation to make those reports if they see situations that they feel are unsafe. We do see this pattern over time that both among the families who are screened only and the families in our home visiting component, that the number of risk factors has been increasing over time. So we know that whereas 10 years ago, we were more of a population-based model, although never totally. We have definitely moved away from that, and our focus has been more on screening families who are higher risk, as well as serving families who are higher risk. And the data has borne out, as it has in the past, that our screening tool, the NBQ, New Baby Questionnaire, which basically calculates the number of risk factors that families have. The more risk factors they have, the higher their risk of substantiated reports. And we've seen this linear relationship over time for a number of years. So when you compare a family who has any one risk factor compared to no risk factors, they have about 1.5 times more chances of being having a substantiated report. If they have 7 risk factors, which is a very small sample, thankfully, they're 11.27 times more likely to have had a substantiated report. So those cumulative risk factors do make a big difference. The other thing we see is, so healthy families, as you probably know, does the NBQ at the point of entry for enrolling the family and identifying whether they're eligible. They also do a more in-depth interview assessment of current and historical stressors, which are many of them are what we know or would call now ACEs, things like history of abuse, family substance abuse, family criminal justice involvement, as well as histories of poor parenting and things like that. So it's a variety of stressors that are assessed more qualitatively through the what they call the parent survey and the healthy families model. And you see again that same relationship, that families with low stress tend to be less likely to have a substantiated report, whereas families who fall or are assessed at that highest stress level do have a 4 times greater chance of having a substantiated report than those in the lower stress category. And then finally, we looked at the difference between children who are receiving a Healthy Families home visiting and the rate of physical and sexual abuse reports. So these are reports that are specifically involving either physical or sexual abuse for children. We look at the rate for all Oregon children in that age range 0 to 3. Compared to our Healthy Families children. And what we see is that Healthy Families children were less likely to experience either a physical or a sexual abuse allegation compared to all Oregon children. But I also just want to remind you too that nationally and in Oregon, the vast majority of substantiated maltreatment has to do with neglect and things like threat of harm, which are things like drug dealing in the home or domestic violence in the home. And those things are strongly, of course, related to living in poverty, whereas physical and sexual abuse are less strongly related in the literature to just being poor and often have more to do with, well, they often have to do with, some of it has to do with substance abuse primarily, as well as more the sorts of parenting issues that we might think about and mental health issues in the Healthy Families. Okay. So those are like the super high level key findings. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and ask if there are any questions. These findings are very similar. Some of you have been around a long time and have been looking at some of these findings for a long time. And there's a lot of similarities from year to year in terms of the things that we see. I think COVID is going to be an interesting year to try to get data and see what that data look like.
Yeah, I was just going to ask Beth when when the next report would be available to kind of look at some of those trends through COVID.
Yeah, the next data we'll have will be 2019, which again is pre-COVID, 2019 calendar year. And then the 2020 calendar year would be the first year that was, of course, impacted by COVID. So that's a little ways off yet, both in terms of we get our data and then we have to wait for DHS to release the data when they have to meet federal reporting guidelines for AFGARs and NCANs, and then they share that data with us. So it's always a delay.
Beth, were you also going to report on the 2020 status report?
Not today. That had not been on my radar.
It was on the agenda, so I wasn't sure.
Oh.
Oh, that's our mistake. Sorry about that. What other questions or reflections are coming up for committee members?
I mean, to me, I think that the one thing that keeps coming up in all of the reporting that we've been doing lately with healthy families is just this, this real shift in the population of focus to families who have higher and higher levels of risk. And I know, Beth, Dasher, you and Emily, you are very familiar with that dynamic, being on the front lines. And just, I keep thinking that is something that needs to be paid attention to in terms of thinking about, with resources and supports for professional development and the workers who are dealing with these increasingly high-risk families and those connections to external supports and resources. I caught a little bit of your conversation at the end about that. So just always keeps coming up for me.
One thing that comes to mind for me when you talk about that, Beth, is, we know on the front lines that more and more often we feel like we're saying, gosh, that's a hard family. Gosh, that's a really hard family. And occasionally we'll get ones that are maybe not quite so intense, but it feels like the intensity level of working with families has continued to increase. One of the things we've adopted in Washington County, but I don't think this is statewide yet, is choosing to use some of our funds to implement reflective supervision groups for our staff. And that I think could be a really effective strategy in helping folks who are dealing with these more and more intensive families, really maintain their boundaries and, just not, kind of attending to the issues of burnout and whatnot. So that might be something to consider for the future.
That reminds me of some of the findings from a study we did with Benjamin and his team on the McVie programs a while back that really, we trying to look at home visitor retention and home visitor stress level, and that the one thing that kept popping up was this idea of home visitors who felt greater support from their organization, were valued, were supported through things like reflective supervision, seemed to have less kind of work-related stress. We didn't have enough data to actually look at retention, but definitely less work-related stress, which is a burnout factor for sure.
I think I look forward to the 2019 data of the maltreatment rates, the per thousand, to see if the trend still continues to head down, or what, or if 2018 was a different kind of blip.
I mean, the other thing, sorry, Emily, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, I don't know. You go, and then I'll keep my thoughts. Go ahead.
The other thing that I mean, just I always go back to this, and I know I'm like, I don't want to use the beating a dead horse metaphor, but the problems in linking at the individual level with our data have gotten more and more and more challenging because we have had no data system, and that it just makes me worry about the accuracy of the data when we then link it to the maltreatment data.
Because I guess that now I have another question. Does that link by virtue of because by what children are in Clara? Like
it's what children are in Clara. It's what children are actually still in service, because that has been a big problem in terms of getting like children who may not have actually been receiving service ever, or children who, should have been exited because their families dropped or left the program a long time ago. Those families are not cleanly exited anymore, to a much greater extent than it used to be the case.
Okay, I'm going to put a side note somewhere else to keep in mind, that because I know Christina is listening too, but I'm wondering how that's impacted by whether or not the baby is enrolled in Clara, or just parent enrolled in Clara.
Well, that's a problem too.
Okay, so I'll keep that in another place for something else. But then going all the way back to like how I'm thinking how the early learning division programs could like support each other, knowing that they're all different and serve like different age groups. I'm struck by like thinking about that 2018, the 2015, 16, 17, 18 data. And then I think back to Martha, what you were sharing with how it was more difficult to pass the HB 2166 bill about suspensions and expulsions, and just the equity impact, the racial disparities in both the implications that has for the hesitation in passing that bill, as well as the implications of I kind of want to look at that chart, and I've seen it before. I think it is a different slide you might have, kind of broken out by race, ethnicity as well. Yeah, I think my mind is doing two things, because we're HFO, where it's kind of traditionally birth to 3, and then preschool is going to be 3 to 5. We're already kind of setting, we're already setting a course in 3 to 5 when the racial disparity exists with expulsions and suspensions at that point. And then that was a perfect tie you made, Beth, because I see in that space is the mental health consultation that was part of that bill. Like, how can that be pulled into home visiting? Maybe a little bit, I don't know. I think whether mental health consultation exists in home visiting or not, reflective supervision is deeply a part of this model in a way that isn't in, I think that's its unique component. This model has the reflective supervision pieces.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would love to see the early childhood mental health model that's being developed also expand to supporting 0 to 3 providers.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's in the short-term plan, but hopefully in the long-term plan.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at Gwen.
I'm just wondering about what that kind of trend towards serving more like families facing greater risk factors, like what that means about what that means for caseloads, and whether I recall during the last policy and procedure update, like a deep discussion around caseload points and whether certain families like warrant additional caseload points because they might take just more time to work with. And so there's like that angle, but then the other angle of like, what are Oregon kind of practices, given that there's a range in number of families on a caseload, like, do we have a perspective on like at which end of the range we'd like home visitors to be at, thinking about like retention and stress and burden and some of those things. So I do think, as folks have been highlighting, this data also really just points to the needs for workforce supports and having some strong kind of advocacy talking points so that we don't keep finding ourselves in a situation where the legislature advocates dollars for more slots, but not dollars to support the home visiting system components, including workforce.
Mm-hmm. And I see, Benjamin, I see your comment too. Like, the two things that come to mind in that data for me usually is the changes in the hotline, the central hotline, as well as when we added the first 2 generalized anxiety disorder questions to the MBQ. Before we were just kind of asking questions about postpartum depression, not generalized anxiety. And I think that has a different impact as well on the discussions that just move into the parent survey process.
Yeah, I see your second question, Benjamin, around acuity. I was thinking that, but more not like, is this a trend with healthy families programs in other states, but like, is this a trend that other early childhood programs in Oregon are seeing or talking about? Like, in general, we find ourselves saying more and more like, wow, this is like a tough family. There's a lot going on here. And I'd be really curious. And I know we talk a lot in our advocacy around like just the economic hardship that families with young children face, in addition to systemic racism and bias. And I'm curious if there is any further level of granularity that we can get to around like recent trends that would inform, a needed investment in early childhood. Seen some of that data with COVID, certainly, but beyond that.
I mean, certainly anecdotally, you hear it all over the place, right? And that's hence the infant early childhood mental health consultation need around the pre-K children. You hear it from pre-K children, you hear it from kindergarten teachers. I'd be interested to see if there's data specific to Oregon that actually reflects it. I mean, the problem is you don't have a lot of good data on kids at that age.
Well, thank you so much, Beth. I'm wondering if there are any final questions or comments before we give it back over to Gwen to talk about strategic plan.
I had one question. Beth, can you clarify when the 2019 report's coming out again?
I wish I could tell you off the top of my head. I'd have to go back to my notes because the timelines keep changing.
Okay.
Well, isn't the NCANS report due in February?
What?
Doesn't the NCANS go in February?
NCANS goes in different time elements depending on, I mean, I don't know if that would be the 2019 data that goes in. But then there's like a 6-month period where the DHS like makes sure that what they submitted was accurate before they release it to the public. So yeah, I'd have to go and look at my timelines before committing, but I can definitely do that. I can do it. I can try to do it while we move on, and otherwise I can follow up by email. Yeah.
Elena, I was just going to offer 2 things. And yes, Martha, I was wondering if you knew I was looking at you and Beth was saying the database system. I was like, I know it's hard on Zoom. I'm like, yes. But 2 things. We have, with the new legislation, but also prior to the new legislation, our preschool development grant, John Reeves has been leading work around the infant toddler mental health consultation model. And I was wondering if this group, would like to invite John at some point for sort of an update on that work, and also thinking about, as we're implementing the new legislation, like what, maybe this advisory committee input might be to that. So I just wanted to put that out. Let me know if you want me to reach out to John at some time to come and give an update. And then the other is I was going to put into the chat log, also with the preschool development grant, we have funding to do, it's really a workforce evaluation survey through, it's the sequel, it's supportive environmental quality underlying adult learning. It's really a survey of workforce. And so that does get at sort of staff well-being and retention. And it's called Sequel. It's out of Berkeley. And I can just put the link if you're interested in seeing what that assessment or what that survey will, like the type of information and the domains that are evaluated in that. So that's okay. It's there for you if you're interested. So, and Beth might have more information on that, but I'm not sure where we were using that as sort of an evaluation of the preschool development grant. So, but we're still in the works of trying to get that off the ground. So, so Elena, those were just the 2 things I wanted to add.
Thank you, Gwen. I mean, I personally think it would be awesome to invite John to share a little bit about the planning around infant and early childhood mental health consultation and Oregon's work to develop a model. So I'll give my personal thumbs up, but it would be helpful to hear if other committee members are also interested in that.
He's excited about it, so I'm sure he'd love to share.
Fabulous. Okay. I'm seeing other thumbs up. So yeah, let's do that at a future meeting. Wonderful. Thank you so much, Beth, and all for just the time reflecting together. And our last agenda item is to look at the Healthy Families Oregon 2021 strategic plan. So Gwen, I think you have this agenda item.
Yes, I do. And so I think I'm going to start, because this was sort of like I said, Elizabeth is out right now, so she asked me to cover. And so I think I need to get a little bit of some background information. I was curious. I do have the document that it looked like Christina sent to the group, but I know that it's set on the agenda to get feedback on the implementation plan. And so I kind of wanted to start though by asking some questions around what has been the advisory committee's role in connection to the strategic plan in the past, and then also what is your desired role in connection. So I just kind of wanted to make sure that any feedback or any kind of inputs and how we're engaging in the strategic plan and its implementation strategies, like that it's meeting your needs, and if there's any refinement or adjustments around our collaboration on it. I kind of felt like it'd be important for me to know that up front. So if that's an okay place to start. So the first is like, what has been the role and what would be the desired role of the committee?
Yeah, thanks, Gwen. I would just, I can jump off and say, in the past, this committee, the HFO Advisory Committee, has seen the strategic plan and I think had an opportunity to weigh in with feedback. We haven't played a real role in shaping it from the start. And so I think as Elizabeth brought to our committee in our last meeting, kind of the old version of the strategic plan, and then some of her early thinking around how to update it to ensure that it's strongly aligned with Raise Up Oregon. We committee members had a chance to kind of send in thoughts or feedback or questions. That's kind of been my understanding of the process to date. And I would say, as I looked at the implementation plan and thought about the role of the committee, I think there are some specific areas where the committee having a role really rose to the top, particularly around elevating parent voice. And then I do think I'm recalling kind of Martha's questions at the beginning around us as an advisory having a strong knowledge of who is the state team working to support implementing this strategic plan, I think would just help us kind of stay up to date and also have an idea of if there are questions we have or areas that we think we could provide support, who to reach out to, how to get connected in. So that kind of awareness piece I see as important. Okay. But what would other committee members add?
Well, I'm the old fart here. Way back when, the advisory committee had an awful lot of input in the strategic plan. And then as time moved forward, we had less of a role. Not that we didn't ever have a role, we always did. And so this committee's reconstituted, and I don't think there's really a clear vision or place as to what the advisory should or shouldn't do, what our roles are or are not. Do we push, for example, where's the database, or do we have input in staffing? Do we have input in what's in the policy and procedure manual? I think we're in an unclear charted territory, but I can tell you that over the years, this is, it's been an up and down process. Sometimes we have more input, sometimes on the committee we've had less. And I'm gonna look around on I think Beth, you've been around longer than I have with the group. Beth Green.
I mean, I think that was accurate in terms of my memory.
So that's helpful. So it sounds like there's been
ebbs and flows.
Yeah, ebbs and flows a little bit. And I was trying to think back through, I've been at the ELD for, I guess, around 5 years now. maybe 6. Oh gosh. And I was trying to think, I know that there was some consistency in leadership. So that was kind of interesting to think about, you know, kind of maybe some of the reason behind some of the ebb and flow. So what I heard, so thank you. That was more kind of the context from the past. And I got a little bit of some of the desired, some more around maybe helping just setting priorities or like the sequencing of the plan in some way that to the point around like the data system, like that is a high priority, like that would be. And then also around staffing in support of the implementation, more information, and then also kind of the input on the policy and procedure manual. But so that sounds like some of like, as we're in the implementation, how we can kind of communicate more and make sure that you're updated. But as we're kind of finalizing the implementation plan and strategic plan, is there, like, I know we're here to get the feedback on it today, so, and I'm not sure like what the best way, it sounds like, Lena, like sometimes that just comes through an email. And we have a lot of work to do on the implementation plan around timelines. So and I think that to me has to do with, you know, our sequencing of kind of prioritizing the objectives and then really thinking. So I was wondering, sorry, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, like, is this a good place for us to look at the document that was sent and say, like, can we think about, like, are there priorities? They're all priorities, but like, is there a way that we think about like where we want to put our energy first as like for sequencing? And then that would help us at the ELD, I think, then really think about some of the timelines and associated work plans that need to be developed, I think, for a full implementation plan. It's pretty high level what I think was presented, you know, and I think, Martha, it would get to more of a detailed work plan, really then outlining sort of instead of entities as owners, sort of like individuals who are actually tasked in managing certain components of the plan. So is that just feedback?
Yeah, I think when, you know, there are a lot of people sitting on this committee, both past and present, that have a really, well, they have a deep passion for home visiting, but they also have a deep knowledge. And I would hope that, because this is only, what, Elena, the second or third time we've met, okay, as the group, okay? So I would hope that we're just not a rubber stamp. And that we're just not, you know, glitz for reaccreditation, that you use the members on the committee with all the full potential that we have. That's my personal request.
Yeah, one other lens I'm thinking of is just the, you know, given these are all important objectives in the strategic plan, and given like we're in transition with the HFO statewide coordinator and even like TA like contracts, like, are there things that the division thinks like this is really priority work and we have a like capacity gap where the committee could somehow play a supportive role in ensuring that priority work is moving forward amidst staff transitions.
That's very helpful, Lena. It made me think of a few things as sort of, are we setting the strategic plan around the capacity we have, or really, you know, the vision and where we need to go? I think that's a really important. And then also, yeah, initially I was hoping that the new statewide, you know, program manager would be on board and would be able to actually own this document, right, and be engaging. And so, but I just think for timing, you know, we do need to move forward with some, and the work is happening, but it's sort of like, how are we documenting that and making sure that it's contained within this strategic plan? So that's helpful. And then before, because I do want to get some kind of sequencing, I think, input today. So just what is the best strategy though to get inputs? I heard email. Elena, you mentioned that Elizabeth solicited some inputs through email. Is that a preferred method, just sort of like, and then the ELD sort of coalesce, or is there, there's a lot of other strategies, use the Jamboard today, and I'm just wondering, what do you see as maybe some better strategies for us, or preferred strategies to get inputs from this group?
Is it possible, Gwen, to get really fully digestible presentation of what the plan is and how it was developed. And I mean, I'm looking at it, and a lot of it comes off of the goals of Raise Up Oregon. But, you know, how does that fit with our individual plans? And I'm looking on on the screen, and I see 2 or 3 program managers. You know, does that really, when you start to go down the system, is that what they need, or are we getting the input coming back up? I mean, I'd hate to have this all top down and then have them all look at me and say, gee, that was nice, I can't do any of it, you know?
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I'm gonna call on Beth Dasher. I mean, Beth, am I?
Yeah, so I did want to give just a little bit more history as to the development of this particular strategic plan. At one of our conferences a few years back, we actually had the program managers all gather in a room and give feedback about the things that that we felt were important and what their priorities were. And so the goals that are listed here were really primarily developed through the work of that group, and then have been refined, I think, you know, to be more in alignment with the Raise Up Oregon goals. But they did originate with the work of the program managers around the state.
And Beth, was that like in 2017 when I was reading through some historical documents? Does that sound right, or was it more recent than that?
I think it was more recent than that. Let me look.
Okay, I'll check again and see, because maybe I can dig up some of that, because it did seem like there had taken some inputs from a larger group, and that we were continually sort of refining it for this new strategic plan. But it's a lot has changed in the few years, so it might be, to Martha's point, a good time to maybe gather more inputs. Okay, so Martha, I heard sort of a presentation on sort of the process around the development of the strategic plan and the potential stakeholders that were involved. And that was sort of my next question is, as we're kind of going through sort of some of this, like, I think we're trying to move towards, you know, finalizing, and I heard definitely the coalition and this group, and to Elena's, like, and I know it's one of our strategies is to get more parent voice into policy and decision making. So, and I know that takes time. And so I kind of wanted to, what other groups would you recommend that we, you know, seek out some input and stakeholder engagement from, besides the parents? Is the coalition a good group to represent staff and program?
Yeah, I'd say the coalition's probably the best, because you have all the program managers in that coalition. And then there are a few other external partners. I'm not sure how in the nitty gritty they are, but there are some of us who are outside of the coalition, outside of state government, who might have some input. And I'm thinking of my organizations, Elena's organization, Jean Vincent's representing PCAO. And then I really would appreciate Beth's input on this because of the data and quite frankly, Beth Green, your analytical mind. You know this program inside out.
Beth, I think, was it created, I think, in 2018. But I feel a little bit of a loss because I haven't seen it recently. I remember offering feedback when Elizabeth sent out the email, which I remember offering feedback. My thought was, when we did this, when the conference occurred and the program managers were in one room, there was a lot of input at the program level towards creating the strategic plan. And then I thought after that, I remember, I'm a supervisor, so I remember months later, we gathered together as a site with supervisors and home visitors, and we offered additional support that I thought at that point rolled up to what we have now.
Right.
To be honest, I feel like what is a little bit further of a gap is like I haven't seen it in a long time, but I'm thinking what you have is a lot of input at the programmatic home visitor supervisor level, which is a bit like family and parent voice, because without asking them directly, your closest ear is going to be the home visitors. Right. And less a little bit. And now I feel lost about how ELD holds it and how ELD is going to use it. So maybe, and which I think for me feeling good and strong and safe going into accreditation year, this is a document that's ELDs that you want to get a lot of input from us. So I'm kind of wondering if the HFO Coalition, which is a group of program managers, I believe, mostly now would say about what they said, like, what would they say now thinking back to 2018? Like, what do I like now? What do I want to leave? And then give that to you and then see how it aligns with Raise Up Oregon. Because I guess what I see now, again, being a supervisor and knowing lots of other supervisors and thinking about like Oregon, I see a lot of individual voices in this document, and I don't see a hold on something. I see lots of, so that's where I'm looking forward to seeing a hold on something. Yeah, that's what I would look forward to.
Yeah, well, I heard that a couple of times, a little bit of the theme of, thank you, Emily, that was really appreciated, is making sure that it's feeling a little bit, just even the formatting a little top down, and starting from the Raise Up Oregon, maybe instead of showing that it was actually, how is that connected from kind of like the inputs that are coming from community, from programs, from parents, and that connection then to Raise Up Oregon. So if I heard that right, if I didn't,
yeah, I mean, because like each one of our sites has kind of like our program goal plan, right? This is like a tiny miniature strategic plan for our site. But how can we like take those all together to be like a statewide vision?
Okay, that's really helpful, so that so we know that as programs are doing their great work, that it is in support of the strategic plan, and then also for them to do their great work, they need the ELD, the resources, right? Funding the resources to ensure that they're able to reach their goals.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because when I see, like,
I apologize for going a little more meta than into the weeds, but I just needed more content.
Because Raise Up Oregon has like three, like, in my mind, it has three spots, three like bigger goals, right? A coordinated aligned services, which in my head, I think of standard 1 and 4, like I think of acceptance and retention. Like, I guess I want to look at that. Like, and then the next one is like having families being able to access resources. Like, I just think I can visualize the best practice standards and where they fit in Raise Up Oregon. And I want to see that really concrete.
Got it. Okay. That's really helpful. Okay. Thank you. That connected more dots for me.
Yeah. And then like back in the data, like that's across all of the best practice standards. You're just going to be able to pull that data into each one of them.
Okay. Okay.
And Gwen, just so you know, I forwarded to you the email that I found. It was actually from our June 2019 conference where we got together in the room and kind of worked on this, because I didn't even think Raise Up Oregon had been completed by then. But I had forgotten, Emily, and thank you for mentioning it, that we had also taken that work that we did at the conference and took it back to the local sites. We talked to our teams, we talked to our advisory. We got a lot of really solid feedback that then should have been sent back and should be available somewhere, but I don't know where.
Okay, I'll kind of dig around for that and see. I'm sure we have it. So, all right. Well, thank you. And I don't know, Emily, how I'm doing on time. Did I go over? That was really helpful. I really appreciate. I know it was definitely feedback on the maybe not what you were thinking of, like digging into that document, but this was really helpful. I thank you for your time. We'll kind of go back and with this information. And I think Beth probably Beth Dasher, that is, probably connect with you a little bit in the coalition in the development of kind of the request to come back. I think here, if that's was sort of more of a presentation on a little bit more of the history and context and what where we're feeling what are the actions we need now to move towards finalizing this and feel really comfortable that we can all, use it, live by it, and implement it, because it does commits us for a few years together. So, and we have such an opportunity here to get it as right as possible. So, all right.
Yeah,
Well,
thank you. Yeah, thanks, Gwen. I think those big picture framing questions are actually, I'm glad we spent the time on those, because it feels like we do, like, those next steps that you outlined would be really valuable in terms of just getting clarity on like who is owning this plan, how can the advisory committee be a resource to weigh in when we have areas of, skill or knowledge or historical background or connection to program staff, but really ensuring that it's something that feels like kind of co-owned across programs, but also the state. And so I think coming back in October with a bit more of a presentation would be great. And then, I think we can figure out what are the right questions or areas of input where you'd really like more committee members to be weighing in.
Sounds good. I appreciate that. And I'll have to look at the timelines. If I know this is quarterly, the team meets quarterly, right? The committee. So
the next meeting is October 5th.
Yeah. So I might need to reach out maybe through email in the meantime, just to kind of get a little bit more, but I appreciate that in preparation for that October meeting. So thank you.
I mean, Gwen, if you need to get to any of us prior to that, I mean, we're happy to do that.
Yeah. Thank you.
I don't think any of us would object to, an hour meeting before the next one if you had to.
Great. I appreciate that, because I was thinking of timelines, and I know we want to get this kind of wrapped up. I know this group isn't necessarily an approval body for that, but like, what is that right role, right? And not feeling like it's just a rubber stamping for accreditation and different things. And so really making it authentic. And sometimes to do that, it does take a little bit more time to get the right voices involved. So
yeah, would you remind us, Gwen, if there's an internal deadline that you're working toward to having the implementation plan finalized?
I'll double check on that. I'm not imposing it, but I think it was something that was sort of unfinished. It was something that I think had been worked on before and hadn't really been like approved internally at the ELD. And I think Elizabeth was really trying to get it wrapped up, as part of her, kind of transition, which I really value and appreciate. But knowing that somebody else will need to be sort of leading that in the future, I thought, well, maybe it's actually a good time to kind of do a check-in on it before moving forward. So,
absolutely. Okay, great. Well, that was our last agenda item for the day. We have just a few moments left, and just wanted to remind folks that our next meeting together will be October 5th. At the same time, I unfortunately won't be joining you all. I am 38 weeks pregnant and about to head out on maternity leave any day now. So it could be any day, or it could be like 3 weeks. So who knows? But either way, I'll really miss this group in October, and know that Gwen and the new Healthy Families Oregon Program Coordinator, statewide coordinator, will work together to pull together an agenda and plan for that meeting. But look forward to rejoining you all at the next one after that. If there are any final comments, feedback, anything like that folks want to put out into the room or leave in the chat on their way out, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, thank you all so much for your time.
Elena, do you need a home visit?
We know the program, right?
I know the program, I do. Oh man, I think I'll need all the support I can get my hands on. So I'm grateful to have a big community wrapped around me. All right, thanks everyone. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye.